I haven't met a single person who's into philosophy, and I'm probably gonna spend this video trying to figure out why. Honestly, I've made a point in one of my more recent videos that, philosophy isn't meant for everybody. And that is mostly because I feel like it takes a certain kind of person to be able to not only process it, but truly engage with it. And I guess I've seen the opposite happen, where like people get exposed to it, but they don't engage in it. They hardly even seem to process it. And the ones that do, you know, they don't have too much to say. Um, like we learn about a lot of great things in both the philosophy classes I've taken so far. And like I'm not even done with ethics yet. I'm close to done, but I'm not done with it yet. So like there's still some more good stuff to learn. Um, it might get better once we stop talking about political theory. That's just not my thing personally. Um, Blake, we just talked about so many good things, or at least things that I think are good, but like these same things are not causing anything. Like they're not. Despite these things, there is still very little participation in the classes, very little engagement. Um, my intro class had decent participation. This one seemed promising, but it's really only been like two people consistently participating, and I'm one of them, so there's that. Um, and the other's a history major, so like I can see why he is able to like engage with this, but honestly, we've been presented with like a lot of theories that go against what people typically learn, if that makes sense. Like we learned about Nietzsche, we learned about nihilism, even like even though it didn't seem like he was actually like a nihilist, he's still associated with it. Um, we learned about how you can take the structure of the allegory of the cave and you can apply it to, and that there are like similarities between that and how like Christianity is structured, and I found that um really fascinating. But that's just me, the person who spent a lot of time thinking about how crazy that actually is. um and I guess a common critique would be like, philosophy is boring. Some people think it is, and that is honestly pretty valid, because even though I don't think the ideas are boring, I think the way that they're like brought up, I guess, can be seen as boring. Um, it could have it could have to do with like a lot of philosophy stuff being really old, so that's gonna like tamper with the wording. But even stuff that's like more modern, I guess it's a lot easier to watch a video on it as opposed to like reading it yourself. Like, of course I'm gonna encourage people to like read the books, but like if that's hard for you, I don't blame you. Um and maybe it's not possible like get rid of that complicated language and still like preserve somebody's meaning, because it may not be. Um I'm just not experienced in like linguistics, translations, and of course we haven't met these philosophers, so we don't know what they were actually trying to say, or at least like maybe we do, but some of that's gonna get mistranslated sometimes. But even through translation, like some of these ideas are like really, I think they're really interesting. That's just me. They, I don't know. Like if we go back to the nihilism example, rejecting um, objective morals, and that's going to be hard for a decent portion of people, especially the ones who are Christian. Um, and even then, like it's so often associated with negativity because you get those nihilists who are like, life is meaningless, nothing matters. But you can spin that as a good thing, and I'm sure that's where hedonism comes from. Um, I don't know if hedonism is like, I don't think it's no, it's not really a subsection of nihilism. It just overlaps sometimes. Um, just think everything is meaningless, but that motivates you to just make yourself happy for um for do what makes you happy in your life. And don't think Nietzsche would have liked that. um so maybe that's why like he didn't want people to become nihilists, is because they may end up only people may end up only doing what they want and not like being productive, not making an impact, just like settling for mediocrity. And that may not be the case. That doesn't seem like it's going to be the case with a lot of people, because it's very hard to go that far, believe in nihilism, and then just like still settle for mediocrity. Um, and I'm not like faulting anybody who questions if anything's worth doing, because a that is something worth questioning. Because in class we talked about different types of nihilism. Um, we didn't spend too much time on expressivism, because we were more focused on like the cognitivism part of it. So error theory nihilism, and I think when people think of nihilism, they think of abolitionism, the idea that like you know are morals don't really mean anything other than what we give meaning to, like they're inherently meaningless. Um, and they're like, I don't know, I having a little trouble with like the premise because um, I'm not like fully one, but basically they're the people who are like, just get rid of morality, it's bad, and they have some they have some points to make there, honestly, with the idea that like, you know, all wars have come from something moral related. Like even if it's, you know, people in ancient Greece fighting over water or something, it becomes a question of morals. Just like, is it morally right to, you know, take somebody else's water, and then maybe the other side is like, it's nobody's water. Like nobody truly owns it. So, you know, even though resources are involved, like morals seem to be involved in like pretty much everything. Um, and like you can relate that to even like current day wars. You know, I'm not really gonna like go into that, but you can definitely do that. And most people just seem to be caught up on like the disastrous results argument, um, which really only works, like, you know, if it even is valid. Like it would only work against abolitionism. You know, most people, you know, think, oh, we get rid of morals, that's not gonna stop. There's nothing to stop people from people not gonna stop people from like, you know, just killing everybody. And because, you know, the only way we can evaluate that is through like usually sci-fi, um like dystopia, or like apocalypse setting stories. um we don't know how true those are going to be. Like some books, some sci-fi books have done really good jobs of like predicting the future, and others haven't. So um there's that. But like people got caught up on the the disastrous results argument. And if I remember correctly, one of the things against that was trying to like refute that is the idea that you know, it promotes, I think the way it was worded was it promotes falsifications. Like it encourages people to like shut down certain options when in reality they should be considered. It basically treats every option equally. Or well, not really. Like you consider every option you have. Um I think the example my professor gave, I don't know if this was like related to any like, I don't know if a nihilistic philosopher like gave this example, or if it was just him. I forgot. But the idea that like, you know, if you're getting bothered by your neighbor's dog barking, um you can think about killing it. It's just a matter of if that is an option. But we are taught in like our society that's you know, to like not even consider that. And it's one of those things where it's like it may not even be a good option. Like, of course, I don't think it's a good option, but it's still an option, and like anything that's seen as morally wrong, like we're not, we can't really like get far when we're considering them, um, because you know taking someone else's life is generally agreed upon to be bad. But what happens when we, the groups in power suddenly start trying to apply their own like opinions to morality, where that same like lack of questioning and lack of considering an option gets applied for something um that's like much less agreed upon, like that's much more controversial. um so that can be used by like a lot of oppressive systems to like get people to stop questioning. But even it took like my professor pointing that out explicitly to get anybody to like actually notice that. um Regardless of like, so like the disastrous results argument like could still hold up. I haven't like studied nihilism enough to know that or to like have an opinion on it. um and I'm not like, and like I said, that would only work, if that's true, it would only work against abolitionism, because like the other two types of air theory nihilism grant the disastrous result argument. um and so, like I was saying, even though my professor was like, most people associate nihilism with abolitionism, like, getting rid of morals, because it's all meaningless. Um, and like I said, there are like valid points for, or well, not like philosophically valid, I don't know, but there are compelling points to go with these arguments. Like they're stronger than you might expect. They're also like, I've only ever met fictionalists, the nihilists I've met, and if you don't know, that's basically like people who think, you know, morality is, um, there are like no normative moral truths, I think was the way it was put. Um, like morals are not objective, like they're meaningless, but we can, it's like beneficial to give them meaning, if that sense, like even if the meaning is subjective. um um so it kind of goes with Hobbes, I guess, is what I was taught. um but it's not like, instead of advocating for an authoritarian dictatorship, um, it's basically saying like, society is completely fine with morals. They're beneficial to us, even though they're not like they don't mean anything objectively. Um, so, like I said, those are the people that like I have met, and I'm kind of like in the middle of those two. Um, where it's just like I see morality as like, yes, I see it as meaningless. Outside, especially outside of like especially outside of like a human perspective, because there are like animals who will not hesitate to kill each other if that means, they survive. Because I know there's some animal species who will fight for mates, for example. Um, they don't have that. They don't have morality holding them back. And like you can think of that any way you want. Um, but I don't know. It's just like I see it as more of like a suggestion. People get mad when I say, I don't think that we should enforce like moral rules that don't harm anybody. Because there are moral rules that like harm people. And these are the things that are gonna stop people from torturing people and like doing really nasty things to them. But also it's like the idea of all like some things that are expected of people. Um, like what is it? Like I don't think it's worth like making a big deal if, for example, somebody doesn't put on deodorant, for example. Like I do think doing that is a net positive. Um, I think people should do it, but I don't think people should be like held to it, if that makes sense. And if you're wondering, that has led me um to like getting yelled at work, for example, for not having it. Um, at least it's not like I never put it on. Um, I don't always remember to do it, but sometimes I just don't care. Where it's just like this is just for people only do this because other people say it makes them. I don't know. It's like you have to, you do this to please others, and most people may not even notice it because like I'm not actively trying to smell your armpits. Like that's creepy. So um so I don't care if somebody doesn't put that on because like we don't wear, like, you could argue we smell better with perfume on, um, but not everybody wears it. Um, like almost all men out there don't wear it, and not every woman wears it. Um, but like that's another thing that's like one for the convenience of other people, but that's not like a requirement for people. Like you're not gonna get yelled at. You're probably not gonna get yelled at work if you don't put on perfume, but you will if you don't put on deodorant. At least in my experience. Um, so is there a lot of like moral things that we as a society have made up that we shouldn't do, but it's like that's not really too big of a deal, if that makes sense. Um, yeah. So I guess I want to talk more about like I already went into nihilism and like morality, but we were presented with this information that's like some people think this, some people think that we don't need at all, or some people are like me. They think we some of them are beneficial, but others are just like not necessary. Um, because I wouldn't be surprised if like whatever causes armpit sweat, for example, um, the production of that, whether it's a hormone or something, I don't know. Actually, because I don't think you can, because hormones are like inside. Sorry, I'm not like very strong scientifically, but like I wouldn't be surprised if whatever causes armpit, um, armpits to smell, you know, depends on the person. Like some people like it's produced more than others. Um, I think it's the same way with like athletic stamina, where it's like more. I think it's um. Oh gosh, I forget. There's something that's like produced. When you with like heavy exercise and like if I'm not mistaken, the people who you know produce that less are the ones with more stamina, because it's not like blocking their system. Um, so it's like it's all gonna depend on the person. Um, I think um, it's just like we're applying the same standard for everybody, when in reality, like that may not be how it works. Um, um, but even like when my class was presented with nihilism, most of them didn't even like consider it. It seemed like, um, they seem to be too caught up in like I don't want to say cognitive biases because I don't want to be one of those person who's like anything that doesn't agree with me is a cognitive bias. Like, it could be a cognitive bias, but like I don't have any evidence for that, so um, I'm not gonna make that claim. But from my observation, people didn't seem to consider it all that much, and even if they did, they didn't like change their minds at all. It's like, I don't know. This could go back to like whether or not the average person actually changes that much in their life, because it doesn't seem like they do. At least on the outside, they may have some little stuff, but it's like a lot of people, will keep the same friends. They'll they have like the same interests that they did, um, or um, what is it? I guess what I'm saying is like most people don't seem to change. Um, like I hardly see people like go through phases anymore. Um, and like, I've seen it's a lot easier to see in like my own household where it's like I've had different phases, my siblings have. Um, but I don't really notice that with other people. Um, you know, all goes back to the allegory of the cave. Like, people find comfort in what they know. They want to, somebody, it's as if like, somebody shows them the way, like somebody shows them how to get out of the cave, and they're like, you know, they see the light, or they like go into the light, and they just go turn right back around. Um, but and it's just crazy that like people are presented with like foundation shattering information, and they just don't do anything with it. My because my professor wasn't like expecting people to agree with us, nor was he expecting people to disagree with us. Like, he wasn't coming in with any preconceived notions, or at least he was trying his best not to. And what is it? Only one person spoke up, and he was like, "Why is nihilism not appealing to you?" And she's just like, "Because." Oh, I forget what it was exactly, but like, I don't know. She says like it's because it's not for me, something like that. Um, where it's just like you can't. I don't want to. I don't know if you can like choose what you believe. Um, that can. Actually, I don't know if you can, because if you could, then people could choose not to be like trans, for example, where they could like choose to believe in God in order to like what they believe is save themselves from hell. Um, but it doesn't feel that simple. So it's like people are exposed to like all this, what I think is life changing information, um, in the not just like with not just in the world of philosophy, but like in general. Um, Another really crazy thing was we talked about like arguments against capitalism, how the theories behind like maybe it was all created just to be like able to control people. Because you think about like the people who are on top, it's really easy for them to stay on top, and the people who aren't, it's really hard for them to get to the top. Um, and it's just something that like seemed to change me. It's like before, I would have preferred things to change. Wasn't like hyped about capitalism, but now it's just like okay, there are definitely because my professor drew similarities um to feudal Europe before before the Enlightenment, before the fall of monarchy, um, where it was just like people who were the serfs on the bottom, they put up with all of it because they were convinced that like God called them to be servants. Like God called them to be indentured servants, and like um and I not only do I think that speaks on how harmful Christianity is, but it also shows just like if you indoctrinate somebody enough, then they're going to find ways to justify like the worst things imaginable. And it also I feel like it's not as bad as not being allowed to work for yourself 5 out of the 6 days. Because I remember like when I was taught it was like 5 days. You do the normal work for the landowner. Um, one of those days, well, the sixth day is you do work for yourself. Like a lot of people like grow their own food to sell, for example, or they would take the day to go fishing, see if they can catch something good. Um, and then the seventh day was for rest, um, because everybody's Christian. But what is it? It's like it may not be as bad as that, but it also, I would argue that like we're conditioned into believing that you know working your life away for like for money that only has we give it a lot of value but it doesn't have any like inherent value. um just like yeah, it has a lot of value here, but we don't I also don't think like we need it to function. um because I was talking about like potentially starting a business yesterday, and the logistics caught up with me. It's like, wait, I don't really know what I'm doing. Have experience in business. Took one business class in high school and two philosophy classes, so it was like not too much. And it's really hard when it's like, I go to college, but then and I graduate, but then I have to pay off loans, so I have to get a job for to pay those loans off. And when I'm done with that, which by the way, that takes like 10 to 20 years, I think, depending on like whatever your like whatever the loan terms are, I guess. Um, and it's like only then can you like actually work to start a business. Like most people won't even do it because by then they're gonna have kids, and I'm fortunate enough that like I don't have to worry about that. But also like even then, how do you save up money in how do you save money up with like a job that hardly pays you? Because I was told last night that if you if you budget your money well enough, you can live off $20 an hour, and full time. And I don't know if that's true. Um, it doesn't feel true because it's like all I remember is being told you can't live on 60,000 in my business class 2 years ago. Um, and like I said, I don't know how true that is either. But it's just like I don't want to. I don't want to like be in. Part of it is like I don't want to be in a place like this, but also I don't want to participate in it either. And it's seen as absurd to not want to work, to not want to what is it? To not want to like honestly provide for yourself because like there are probably other ways to do it, but not giving in to like letting money control your life. Because I'm one of those people who's like it doesn't motivate me too much. Like I care more about a job's enjoyment than its pay. And that can go both ways, where it's like um where it's like, yeah, I miss out on well-paying jobs because I don't like them, but it also may mean I settle for a job that most people won't settle for because I enjoy it. Um, and I really don't. I'm not like certain about a lot of this stuff. It's just a lot of thoughts where it's like I don't want to work. I don't want to. I don't want to like participate in this economy that probably isn't going to benefit me. I was told that like dropping out to start a business is a bad idea. Dropping out to not do anything is a bad idea. But going to school and, even though you have a ton of debt, um, even if you get a degree that, like, allows you to get a job quickly, like, you still have to pay back those loans, and that job might not even be enjoyable. So, like, that's what this has to do with, like, philosophy, is because we talked in that class about, like, the problems with capitalism, and the idea that, like, we're conditioned that, like, we need money to survive. It's like that doesn't have to be the case. The problem is nobody sees it that way. Um, it's just like people don't think, but also, like, many times they're taught not to. That's why I don't like, the school system, and that's why I, advocate more for critical thinking. I'll call something out if it says it encourages it, but it doesn't. Mostly that happens with college. And it's just like during that lecture where we were talking about stuff like this, even when we were talking about, like, critical race theory, um, and, like, the attack on that, and, like, whether or not it's a good or bad thing to be against it, um, it was like nobody nobody seemed to care because nobody, like, participated actively. Um, I was one of the only people who did, and I will say it's not, like, completely these my classmates' faults, or just, like, people in general, because you know if they're not into philosophy, they're not. That's fine. Um, you could argue, like, why are they taking this class? But I don't know. For some people, it's just like the the best of the options. It's like they have to get some kind of, like, humanities class, and they found this to be the best option because they're more interested in it than like sociology or psychology. Um, so it's like, just because you pick the most enjoyable humanities field for you doesn't mean that by itself is enjoyable. So it's like the college system is set up like, a lot of your classes are in areas you don't like. And, like, I have a whole hour long video on that. Please go check that out. But I really do think that, like, part of the reason why people don't, they're presented with this information and they don't care is because they never cared in the first place. And, there's nothing really the professor can do about it. So the professor's fault is not, like, it's not even fully the student's fault. It's the system where, the and the students are taking classes they don't want to take, the professor has to teach it to students who don't want to take it and likely aren't paying attention, and everybody ends up miserable in the end. Because, even though the professor's getting paid for it, it's like they probably didn't want to get a PhD to do this. Like, it may not have been worth the effort for them. But, like, on the student side, it's like, why am I paying for this? And for most people, the answer is like, because they were pressured into doing it. It's like, I made this decision at 17 because I was told it was best for me by, like, pretty much everybody. And it's like, yeah, I questioned it, but also I was like, I didn't like high school, so I wanted to, find a, I was hoping it would be a better environment. I don't even know if it is. But it's like these people are like pressured into going to college, and they take a philosophy class reluctantly because it's like it's better in their mind than taking anthropology or like another, or actually anthropology would be a social science, like it, because I think philosophy gave you a humanities kind of they take it because they think it'd be the best humanities option. Maybe it is for them. Let's just assume they're right. Let's just assume that they're better off in this philosophy class than in another humanities class. Um, that doesn't mean they're still going to enjoy it. And so many people are just like, your perspective on it matters. And, whether or not you enjoy it you know, is your own decision. It's like you're in charge of whether or not you enjoy something. And it's like, to me, that doesn't feel true. Um, just because of how like unpredictable things are. Um, you can be excited for a class, and then something bad happens, or um, it's not as interesting as you thought, and it just like kills your mood. And these same people are going to be like, oh well, you let it bother you. And it's like, but we are allowed to feel those feelings. It's not a bad thing to not enjoy something. And I don't know if you can just, convince yourself that it's going to be good and it will be good. Because that gets into like gaslighting territory. Um, and this is something that is like normalized, where it's like your mindset is what matters. Like, don't focus on what actually happened. Focus on how it's making you feel. Focus on how what you're going to do about it. And it's like some things that happen to you. You're allowed to um feel bad about, like, you, especially with like a job where it's like you don't have to convince yourself that it's going to be good because anything could come up and just ruin it. And it's better to be like, it's better to like think about that and prepare for it, I think, than to ignore that entirely and just say, it's gonna be fine. Because that is what leads to people staying in miserable working conditions, or like it leads to people continuing on journeys they don't want, because they try to convince themselves that is what they do want. um, and like, even if something's beneficial for them, doesn't mean like they're gonna want it. So if we go back to philosophy, it's like, I don't think you can convince these people to like engage themselves in it, because they can always try to, they can always like come in willing to pay attention, and they do. But that's like a different thing, because just because you pay attention in class and you participate in it doesn't mean like it's enjoyable. Even if you write down what the professor has to say, and you engage with that content, you may not want to do that, because I think I said this in um another video, where it's just like, if our minds don't think it benefits us, or it doesn't interest us, we're not going to want to do it. We're going to put less cognitive energy into it. And like, it makes sense scientifically, where it's like, I think I brought up the example, I forget if it was in a video I uploaded or if it was like in a draft. So if you didn't hear this, it's because I didn't. If you didn't hear this already, it's because I didn't upload the video where I talked about this. But I talked about like the idea of early humans, and what they could do, or like one of the most, like, probably the most important thing, like the most important thing for any organism is like survive. So they, early human could have been, um, could have spent their whole day counting rocks, for example, or they could have, um, spent that day trying to find food. Um, and it's one of those things where it's like, of course, that humans going to gravitate towards finding food because it's in their best survival interest to do it. They're going to gravitate towards it. And the same thing applies. It's a little bit different, but it's also like, I don't know if it's the idea that like happy people are more likely to survive, but it's like, why else um, would we like gravitate towards stuff that we like? It's just tough when you're put in a situation where you don't like have a choice. It's like, you could like you could spend your like we could spend our days doing things that we enjoy, and ideally make money off of it so we can survive. Or but like what most people end up doing, sometimes no fault of their own, is they just do what other people have been telling them their whole lives. And that's, go to, stay in school, you're gonna get a good job. And like I said, like even if the pay is really good, you may not enjoy it. And that enjoyment may outweigh the pay. Um, I'm not gonna be mad at somebody who, if somebody quits a high paying job, of course, like naturally I'm gonna be confused, but like if they tell me it's because they didn't enjoy it and that outweighed the pay, then I'll understand, as long as um they have like another plan for what to do, and like even if they don't, um, they accepted that responsibility when they quit that job. So it's like they do, as long as they're okay with that, then and they find that to be better than working a job they hate, then I'm not gonna fault them for it. Um, but it also, goes back to like the idea of pressure and doing what the system wants you to do, which is to keep working and to keep um you're convinced that it's like providing for yourself, and many times it is, but it's at the expense of like other people benefiting from it. And these people, I don't think, are people who deserve to benefit from it. um so it's just like we're going back to like what people are socially pressured to do. People are socially pressured to go to college. And what do they have to do in college? Take classes they don't like. They have to pay for classes they don't like. They have to pay way too much money for classes they don't like, at least here. It's a lot more. It's a different story if you're dealing with, a place that's free college. Um, but it is pretty crazy that like, we've normalized people making this huge financial investment that they may not even know how to do, that they may not even want to do. They're just like told they have to do it to make it far in life. And what is it? Like they told they have to do it, but there's like so many things that could go wrong that like nobody ever acknowledges. And that's like what I'm trying to do here, is like, the like you've seen it already with me. I think that like the American dream isn't really a dream. It's like, well, some people, desire it, but I don't. It's like I've already cut a lot of things out of it. Like, I don't want, not only do I not want kids, I think it's morally wrong to have kids. Even in a better society. It's just like you can't get past the consent argument. Um, I like to make another video on that. I haven't made one on that in a little while. So I'll wrap it up here with saying that, when we were when we were talking about like things that are, arguments against capitalism, it's like you saw here how like when talking about it, like I talked about it for a little while and like I realized the flaws in it and realized why it was going on, the idea of social conditioning and people doing it without thinking because that's what they're told to do. Um it's exploiting the basic human nature. We're told we need this to survive. Um so it's like, but people never, when people are exposed to this information, not all of them like go through the, like, even if you don't agree with, the arguments against capitalism, if you don't agree that capitalism is generally harmful, then, you're allowed to think that, but, I'd prefer if people could at least acknowledge, like, could at least understand why other people believe it. Because, like, I don't blame people for, like, being convinced that the system is great. Because, the idea of free market, having choices in what you buy and what um what you buy, um like different types of products, different options, therefore lower prices because more people are competing. um it's appealing to a lot of people. um it's just like from the moment where we start education, we're conditioned to believe that this is, the best system possible. That that it leads to people pursuing their dreams, but it's like that's only true for some people. So I guess, I do get annoyed at people who, even when they're exposed to this information, just don't do anything about it. They don't question it. They don't question that, this economic system that, our entire society is built on is bad. Um, but it's not always their fault because, like, they're told they're not allowed to question that. Or even if they're allowed to question it, they're not allowed to, like, come to the conclusion that it's bad. That's one of those things where it's like, it's similar to how some branches of Christianity don't allow you to question anything, like regarding scripture or whatever. Others do, but they try to influence you. Um, like, growing up in a more progressive church, like people were, you weren't always gonna get shamed for leaving the church, but like, you tell somebody you don't want to go back, it's like they'll tell you, "Oh, I pray you'll find you'll see the truth again." Or, somebody hasn't come for a while, it's like, "Oh, these doubts are normal, but they'll eventually find the path to God." And it's like they want you to come to a certain conclusion, and sometimes they will tell it straight to your face. That, like, they hope you'll learn to think that way again. Um, and there's a difference, I think, worth noting where, just because being allowed to question something isn't enough, it's being allowed to come to whatever conclusion you want without, like, societal shame, I guess. Whereas, like, if even the churches that allow you to question it, they want you to come to the conclusion that, God is real and Jesus is the savior. But what is it? Not everybody's going to come to that conclusion. And, people are seen as lost if they don't come to that conclusion. People are seen as, like, I think they're often referred to as, like, lost sheep, because sheep are like a sheep without a herd. Um, and I guess what I want to say to that is, like, not everybody wants to be a sheep. Like, not everybody, like, in this metaphor, like, not everybody wants to blindly follow something because, other people see it as good. Because it may not be, you may not think it's good. Um, so you may not think the institution of college is good. You may not think the idea of taking classes you don't want is good, but you're still, like, often like kind of forced to participate, or even if not forced, like, you're still pressured into participating anyway, because you're often told that, like, you don't have any other option. It's like, not gonna get mad at people who aren't into philosophy. I think it's more of, like, a thing where, I do wish that, like, more people were interested in it, um in person, at least. I can't find anybody in person, but I also wish that, like, the system wasn't built like this to encourage this to happen, because I don't think it benefits the students or the professors. Although at this point, like, you could argue that's not even what the main goal is. Um, it's like what I discussed in um my gen ed video. It's like adding a new gen ed that's very similar to a previous one, where it's just like, yeah, it would help people, but I don't think it's worth the cost, if that makes sense. Because what that does is it makes people more likely to, if they need more required credits to graduate, then, and, these classes can't overlap like they previously were able to, um then people who aren't on the right path, not like the right path, but people who aren't on a fast path to graduate are now going to suffer because not everybody wants to knock their gen eds out, even if they don't know what they want to do. Just like the idea that like I've been avoiding like my US history requirement and like political science requirement, because that is just something that doesn't appeal to me personally. And like I know I don't know everything about it, but it's like some people feel that same way with philosophy. And I would much rather, and I'm sure professors would much rather people be in philosophy classes who actually want to be in there. Or even then, like they try it out and they figure if they like it or not. Um, that's what I'm told. Like the justification of it is, but instead of getting the freedom to do it, we have to do it. We have to experiment. We have to take all these classes that we don't like. Um, it's like not everybody's going to be interested in philosophy. I do want to meet more people in who are interested in philosophy, but I think that'd come with a systemic change. Um, and maybe I could find, groups outside of college like that. Um, I wouldn't be against that. Um, so like I am annoyed that like, a lot of people don't critically think in a class that, could really benefit them if they do. Um, and I don't blame people for like wanting to stay ignorant, I guess, like not considering it for fear of like potentially losing all that because that is a very like real thing. Some people take it better than others, so if that happens to you, I'm not gonna blame you for finding comfort in it, not doing that, but also it's just like why is this the case with pretty much everybody? Like, of course it's gonna be the case with some people, not everybody's into philosophy, but also like it's a philosophy class and most people in it aren't into philosophy. And there'd be a much the class would go a lot differently if people, if people were as engaged as the history student I was talking about earlier, um, pays attention, participates, that's not his major, that's not his like main area of interest, but he still um seems to find enjoyment in it. Um, it's like if everybody tried to participate at the level of him, then the class would be a lot more enjoyable for the students who like it and the professor, but the problem is the students don't like it. So, I'm not going to expect people to participate if they don't want to. It's just more of like, it's just like they're not thinking about this because they don't think it's, they think they see themselves as, having something better to do. And, there are probably more productive things people can do than, sit and get lectured about philosophy. Um, even with how applicable it can be. Um, some people just don't have like too much of a desire for social justice, and that's their own opinion, like their own thing. Um, it could come with like a lack of empathy on other people's parts, where it's like they don't see how this can be appealing. But even then, it's like I don't think that's necessarily a lack of empathy, because like even the most empathetic people can't find uses for everything, benefits, reasons why somebody would like something, um with like why somebody would like one of the worst things imaginable in their opinion. It's just like people are like only empathetic to a degree, I guess. It's like, of course that's the case with me too. Like I'm not, when people say, um when people say I guess a big example for me is like trans men. I can totally see why they, feel more like why being masculine more appeals to them, because like who wouldn't want to, like most people would want to be in a position of power if they weren't already in it. And like even then the people who are already have it, may want more, because greed is totally a thing. But I'm not saying trans men are greedy, but it's like, I don't blame them for wanting to be the gender that is seen as dominant. And like of course that's not the only reason they, see themselves, that's not the only reason why they feel masculine on the inside. Some of it's like, they like the way masculine clothes feel, and that's something that like I can't relate to. And I personally don't know how, somebody could find that to be more comfortable, because um that's not the case in my experience. Like I don't know how somebody could find, shorts and a t-shirt comfortable, because to me it just feels like boring, but also like not appealing because it's boring. um but at the same time, I don't blame them for wanting to be shirtless, because I'm sure many of them feel like freed when they are able to do it. um so it's just like, yes, I do think there is a problem with, a lack of empathy, but it's like there's only a person can only be so empathetic, if that makes sense. And even if they get caught up, like, I find that like more empathetic people are easier to take advantage of, because um you can feed them somewhat plausible or like seemingly plausible explanations, and they'll buy it, and they'll have that empathy, where it's like, oh yeah, that's valid. But it, you know, for all they know, it might not be true in the first place, and you know, that's how people get taken advantage of. Um, so it's also just like, what's it? Um, also just like the idea that you know, people can't always find something in their head that tells them why philosophy can be appealing, even not like, even not to another, not to them, but like to another person. Because again, like these people can see philosophy as boring, um, but you know, and maybe they can't find a reason why somebody would be into it. Like that's not like that is, you know, a lack of empathy, but it's also just like it could be the same way with like me in men's clothes. Where it's like I can't find a reason why somebody would find that appealing. It's like that's gonna happen to everybody. So, you know, there are people who don't see anything appealing about philosophy, don't see anything appealing about like humanities in general. Um, Especially if they're more like math and science oriented, where it's like instead of um, you know, like questions with a ton of different like answers or like something that doesn't have an answer at all sometimes that you deal with in philosophy, as opposed to, you know, you need a specific formula, you need to substitute this value for this variable and that kind of thing. And like I can see how people find it to be more appealing. um so that's part of the reason why you know, I don't like the idea of like gen ed philosophy classes, is because, you know, I want people to be able to take classes they want, especially if they're paying for it. Like, I can't stress that enough. If they're paying as much money as they are, they should have that freedom. And, you know, they shouldn't owe an institution